My parents skipped my baby's funeral to throw my sister a birthday party, and now they wonder why people think they're monsters. While we were saying goodbye to our son, they were posting party pictures. And now they act surprised that the world sees them for who they are. My son, Marcus, was only 8 months old when he passed away a few weeks ago due to complications from pneumonia. And my parents? They chose to go to my sister Katie's 30th birthday party instead of attending his funeral. My wife and I live about an hour away from my retired parents. Katie lives in the same city as them. She has always been the center of their attention. That's been a pattern my whole life, but I won't bore you with every example. The contrast became crystal clear when my wife got pregnant. My parents' reaction? Lukewarm at best. My dad just said, "That's good news," and my mom immediately shifted the conversation to how Katie might want kids someday too. My wife's parents, on the other hand, were overjoyed. They started buying baby clothes immediately and came over every weekend to help set up the nursery. When Marcus was born, the difference became even starker. My in-laws rushed to the hospital in under an hour. My parents came the next day, for about 30 minutes, because they had to get to their book club. Over the next 8 months, my in-laws visited twice a week without fail. They brought groceries, helped clean, cooked meals. My parents? Maybe 6 visits total, and always when it was convenient for them. I would send photos of Marcus to my parents. My mom would reply with a thumbs-up emoji. My dad barely responded. Meanwhile, every photo Katie posted online got paragraphs from both of them about how gorgeous and hilarious she looked. 3 months ago, Katie announced her plan for a big birthday bash, a full weekend getaway with her friends at a rented venue. My parents jumped right in to help with the planning and couldn't stop talking about how special it would be. At the same time, my wife and I were planning Marcus's baptism. We picked the date, coincidentally the same weekend as Katie's party. We had no idea they would overlap. When I told my parents about the baptism, my mom instantly mentioned the party. I suggested they come to the baptism in the morning and head to the party afterward. There was plenty of time for the drive. But they said it wasn't feasible. 3 weeks ago, Marcus came down with what seemed like a simple cold. My wife and I weren't too worried, babies get sick often. But his condition worsened over the weekend. By Monday, he was struggling to breathe, so we rushed him to the hospital. Doctors diagnosed him with pneumonia that had progressed fast. We spent 3 days in that hospital. My wife never left Marcus's side. I slept in the chair next to his crib. My in-laws took shifts bringing us food, clothes, whatever we needed. I called my parents that first day to let them know. My mom said they'd try to come by soon. They never did. By Wednesday night, Marcus's condition declined sharply. Despite everything the doctors did, he passed away early Thursday morning. What followed was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and funeral arrangements. My wife was paralyzed by grief. I handled most of the planning with help from her parents. I called my parents Thursday afternoon and told them Marcus was gone. My mom said, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and then asked about the funeral. I told her the service would be Saturday morning, at our church. There was a long pause. Then she said, "But Saturday is Katie's birthday party." I asked her, "Are you saying you won't come to your grandson's funeral because of a birthday party?" She replied, "We understand this is hard, but we already committed to helping with the party." Then my dad took the phone and said, "We already paid the deposits for the venue. It's too late to cancel now." I hung up. I had nothing more to say. Friday night, they called again. My mom immediately started talking about how stressful the party preparations were. She said they felt awful about missing the funeral but hoped we'd understand, canceling the party would upset too many people. I hung up again. The funeral was Saturday morning. My wife's entire family was there. So were our friends, my co-workers, and some relatives from my side. The church was full of people who came to support us. It helped a little. But my parents' absence? It was glaring. Everyone noticed. They were the only grandparents who didn't show. During the service, I checked Katie's Instagram stories. There they were, my parents, happily hanging decorations for the party. After the burial, people asked me where my parents were. I told the truth. I told them where they were and what they were doing. The week after, my parents didn't call. They didn't visit. My wife and I could barely function. She went on leave. I was using my bereavement days. Her parents came every day to help us survive. The following Friday, nearly a week after the funeral, my mom finally called. She didn't ask how we were. She didn't mention Marcus. Instead, she wanted to invite us to dinner on Sunday, so Katie could show us photos from her party. She said it would be good for us to get out of the house and be with family. I told her we weren't interested in seeing party pictures. She replied, "Life has to go on." Katie got such beautiful gifts, and the party was a huge success. Then she asked if we could bring dessert because your wife's cakes always impress everyone. I hung up. And I haven't stopped thinking about Marcus. And how my parents barely cared, if they ever cared at all. They missed nearly all of his short life. And now they missed his funeral too. My wife's parents have been our only family support during this nightmare. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive my parents for this. Missing their grandson's funeral because of a birthday party feels truly unforgivable. Update 1. I want to thank everyone who has shown more tact and compassion to my wife and me than our own parents ever did. What we're going through is unbelievably hard, but your support has been incredibly comforting. About a week after I posted the original story, my Aunt Patricia, my mom's sister who lives in another state, called me. She said she had reached out to my parents to offer her condolences for Marcus, but the conversation felt strange. I told my aunt the full truth about what had happened. She offered her condolences again. She had already called me when everything first happened, but this time she said she would call again later. When she did, she was furious. She had called my mom back and confronted her for lying. And my mom actually admitted that they had chosen to go to Katie's party instead of the funeral. Patricia told me that she immediately contacted other family members, including me, my dad's brother, and several others who hadn't attended the funeral because they lived far away. She wanted them to know the truth, because what our parents did was, in her words, unforgivable. My dad's brother called him and said he couldn't believe what he was hearing. People began calling us after their conversations with my parents, to offer support, to tell us they stood with us, and to let us know they were cutting contact with our parents unless and until they apologized. A few days later, my mom called me. She was crying. She said the extended family was treating them like outcasts and that it was incredibly painful to be seen this way. She tried once again to explain their decision, to give more excuses for why they did what they did. She said it had made sense to them at the time. When she was done, I asked her, "Do you understand that Marcus was your grandson? That you'll never see him again? Never get to say goodbye?" She said, "Of course I understand. But he was just a baby. He wouldn't have even known whether we were there or not." I couldn't respond to something that heartless. I hung up and blocked both of my parents. 3 days later, Katie called me. She had never contacted me directly through all of this. She said she was tired of the family drama and wanted to resolve things. She suggested we meet to talk and try to work things out. I asked her what exactly she thought needed to be discussed. She said she understood that my wife and I were grieving, but she believed we were being unfair to our parents. She also said that Marcus's death was tragic, but that it shouldn't be used as an excuse to punish people who were just trying to live their lives. Katie went on to say she had been looking forward to her 30th birthday for a long time, and that our parents were essential in making it special. If they had cancelled at the last minute, it would have ruined everything she had planned. She asked me to consider how selfish it was to expect them to abandon her celebration. I asked her if she truly believed her birthday party was more important than her nephew's funeral. Katie replied, "That's not a fair question. They're two completely different kinds of events. Funerals are for the living, to find closure. Our parents could have their own private moment of remembrance for Marcus without having to attend the formal service." She genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. She saw the situation as a scheduling conflict that had been resolved in the most practical way. I ended the call by telling her I didn't want to hear from her again. Later that same day, she sent me a text. According to her, she was disappointed in the way we're handling things. Meanwhile, my wife's parents have remained our main source of support. The contrast between our families is like night and day. Honestly, without them, my wife might have fallen apart completely. I keep thinking about how different my life would have been if I'd been born into my wife's family instead of mine. My aunt called me again yesterday. She said my parents had reached out to her, asking her to arrange a family meeting with me. She told them there was nothing left to resolve. Update 2. Hi. I need to share what's happened over the past few weeks, because my parents might actually be even worse than I thought. About 2 weeks after my last update, I got a call from my workplace. My boss wanted to let me know that my mother had contacted the school, asking if I was fit to return to work. She told the front office that I was having a crisis after a family tragedy. My boss assured me that she handled the call professionally and that my job was not in danger. She also told me that my mom had asked several inappropriate questions, about my use of sick days, and whether the school provided mental health resources. My boss responded that employee information was confidential, and if my mom had concerns, she needed to speak to me directly. Not only did my mom cross a line by calling my job, but she also implied that I was mentally unstable. Later I found out that she made similar calls to my wife's workplace. My wife's boss was far less diplomatic. He told my mom to go to hell. This pushed me to call my mother and tell her to stop. She said she was worried about us, and since we weren't answering her calls, because she was blocked, she just wanted to make sure we were getting the help we needed. I asked her what kind of help she thought we needed. She said she was concerned that we were making bad decisions while grieving, and that we might end up doing something that could hurt our careers or our future. She told me she'd been talking with Katie about the situation, and that they both agreed my wife and I were handling Marcus's death in an unhealthy way. She added that she understood we were sad about losing Marcus. But she thought we needed to move forward and not dwell in the past. I asked her, "Do you seriously believe that calling both of our jobs behind our backs was appropriate? Do you have any idea how humiliating and invasive that is?" She said she didn't mean any harm, and she was just trying to make sure we were okay. Then she brought up Katie again and said Katie was worried too. According to her, Katie had noticed how much we were pulling away from the family and wanted to help us reconnect. I told her that what she did was a violation of boundaries, plain and simple. That we weren't pulling away, we were protecting ourselves from people who had shown zero respect for our pain. I told her to never contact our workplaces again. She started crying again and said I was being cruel, that I was punishing her for making one hard decision, and that she didn't deserve to be treated like a villain by her own son. I hung up. My wife was shaking when I told her what happened. Her boss had already told her about the call from my mom, and she was furious. We agreed to file a report with HR at both of our jobs, just to document what had happened in case there were further incidents. We also changed our phone numbers. We didn't tell anyone except my wife's parents, my Aunt Patricia, and a few close friends. A few days later, my mom tried to reach us through email. She wrote a long message about how heartbroken she was, how much she missed us, and how much she regretted how things turned out. But even in the email, there was no real apology, just more attempts to justify their actions and blame our grief for clouding our judgment. She ended the email by saying that Marcus would want us all to be together as a family. That one line, trying to use Marcus as leverage, made me so angry I couldn't sleep that night. How dare she invoke his name? How dare she speak for him when she didn't even care enough to come say goodbye? But she said we were letting our grief take over our lives. She told me that successful people know how to compartmentalize their emotions and keep functioning normally, even during hard times. She brought up other family members as examples, people who had experienced loss but didn't let it affect their jobs or their relationships. I asked her if skipping her grandson's funeral was, in her mind, a healthy example of compartmentalization. She said that was different, because they had already made a commitment to Katie. And keeping commitments, she claimed, was a sign of good character. She said that while Marcus's death was tragic, it didn't change the fact that other people's lives and celebrations still mattered too. 2 days later, Katie showed up at our house. My wife answered the door because I was at work. Katie walked in, uninvited, pushing past her like she owned the place. She brought a gift bag filled with leftover decorations, party favors, and photos from her birthday celebration. She told my wife that she thought maybe we'd like to see how beautiful the party had been, and that maybe it would help us process our grief. My wife called me at work, and I came home immediately. When I arrived, Katie was sitting on our couch, scrolling through her phone and showing my wife more pictures and videos from the party. I told her to leave. She replied that she hadn't finished explaining why the party had been so important. I told her I didn't care about her party, and that she needed to leave my wife alone. Then Katie said something that I will never forget. She said that her birthday celebration was more important than my wife's trauma, because she had made it to 30, while our baby hadn't even made it to 1. So, in her words, you can't really miss someone that much. My wife, who had been moving through grief like a ghost for weeks, snapped out of that trance in an instant. She grabbed my sister by the hair and started throwing her across the room. I had to pull them apart, because I truly don't know what would have happened if I hadn't stepped in. And frankly, part of me believes Katie deserved every bit of it. Eventually, Katie left, but not before threatening to sue my wife for assault. Then she added that she'd be the bigger person and wouldn't press charges, as long as we apologized. I held my wife tightly and told Katie that if she didn't leave right now, I'd let go, and she could test out how good her survival instincts really were. She left in a hurry. Afterward, my wife took the gift bag and threw it straight into the trash. The next day, my mother called, because I had forgotten to block her again. She was furious that I had let my wife attack Katie, and said I should have done something about her. She claimed Katie had tried to be kind, and that she didn't deserve to be treated that way. I told her to go die. And that I wouldn't be attending her funeral either. She's now fully blocked, for real this time. But my wife and I decided to change our phone numbers anyway. At least now, my wife has started to come out of the trance she was in from all the grief. We've been working with a therapist who specializes in bereavement and family trauma, and she's been incredibly helpful, especially for my wife. Honestly, for both of us. Even though I've tried to be the strong one, this has deeply affected me too. I don't believe anyone can go through something like this normally. No parent should have to bury their child. Update 3. My parents made one last attempt to contact us. They drove to our house and waited in the driveway for 3 hours until I got home from work. When I saw their car, I was furious. These people, not only have they been completely insensitive to everything we've gone through, but they also can't respect our grief enough to just stay away and stop adding more stress. My dad did most of the talking. He said they'd been thinking about everything for a while and had come to apologize. That they finally realized it was the right thing to do. He said they now understood they had made the wrong decision by going to Katie's party instead of Marcus's funeral. He claimed they were sorry for the hurt they'd caused and wanted to find a way to repair the relationship. So I asked the question. If you had to make the same choice again, what would you do differently? He said they would try to find a way to attend both events, maybe leave the funeral early or arrive late to the party. That told me everything I needed to know. Even after months of conflict, after being rejected by the extended family, my parents still think a damn birthday party is something to negotiate around a funeral. They still believe the goal should have been to juggle both. Their priorities are completely upside down. And even though literally everyone has told them they were completely wrong, they still can't see it. Their favoritism toward Katie is so deep, it blinds them. My mom stayed quiet for most of the conversation, but when my dad finished, she said she hoped we could put this all behind us and focus on rebuilding our relationship. She said our bond was important to them, and they wanted to find some kind of balance, some middle ground. She added that holding on to anger wasn't healthy, and that Marcus would have wanted us to forgive and move on. I told them not to bring Marcus into this. I told them I still thought they should die. And that using their dead grandson like that was low, even for them. That I would not allow it in front of me. My mom started crying. She said I was misunderstanding everything, and that it wasn't their intention to use Marcus, only to show that they, too, were hurting and thought about him often. I told her not to think about him. That it was an insult to his memory. I said we weren't sharing grief, because we were mourning the loss of our son, while they'd probably care more about funeral arrangements than my death, if it came to that. The only thing that matters to them now is how the world sees them, as narcissistic parents and grandparents, filled with favoritism and the emotional range of a rock. My mom sobbed and kept telling my dad how unfairly I was treating them, while my dad consoled her and helped her back to the car. I haven't heard from them since. And I don't expect to. I can't believe they still have the energy, and the audacity, to act like they're the victims here. It's always the same three people, my parents and Katie. The only ones who could possibly see themselves as victims in all of this. Even people who went to Katie's birthday and didn't know about my son, once they found out, none of them defended what happened. It's like my parents are waiting for my forgiveness just so the rest of the world can finally stop judging them. But they're not going to get it. At this point, I'd prefer if they just went back to how they've always been, ignoring my life, ignoring my son's existence, and staying in their little bubble where only Katie matters. But because it hurts them to be seen as the bad guys, now they're making it worse, still acting out of selfish motives. At least now, my wife and I have started talking about the possibility of having another child someday. Not as a replacement for Marcus, but as an expansion of our family. We're not ready to make any decisions yet, but the fact that we can even talk about it is a good sign. We don't want to stay trapped in this grief forever, don't want it to define us, tear us apart, or stop us from continuing our lives. It's still too soon. But we're working on it. It hurts like hell, believe me. But knowing there are people like all of you. My wife's family, my chosen family that excludes my parents and sister, and even friends of Katie's who've reached out to support us, that heals something. It's good to know that in a world where something as painful as losing a child exists, there are still people who aren't like my parents. People with empathy. People with values. It gives me hope. And it gives me strength to keep going, with my marriage, and with the dream of growing our family. Just wanted to share that. A little reflection. Update 4. Last week, more than 3 years since my last post, we found out my wife is pregnant again. We had been trying for a few months, once we finally healed enough to seriously consider it again. I won't lie, the process of getting to this point wasn't easy. It took a lot for us to even take the first step toward reviving our original plan of having at least 3 children. But here we are. And no, we're not going to bother telling my parents or Katie. I know they won't care anyway. And I know what you're probably wondering, what happened with my parents? The relationship is over. Completely. There was no coming back from our last interaction. They've learned to live like hermits, because everyone despises what they did, especially after hearing about all the things they said and did, not just missing the funeral. We never hid anything. We were always completely honest when people asked. My parents used to have an active social life, dinner parties, golf outings, that kind of thing. But ever since all this happened, they've been shut out. Even now, I still occasionally get messages from people I barely know, telling me they can't believe what my parents did, and offering their condolences. Something similar has happened with my sister. She hasn't celebrated a birthday since, not publicly, at least. And all the photos from her 30th party have mysteriously vanished. She moved a couple of years ago, because all of this affected her job. Which is honestly good for us. My parents no longer have a reputation to protect, so they leave us alone. And my sister doesn't even live close enough to drop by anymore to bless us with her unsolicited opinions. Everything has fallen exactly where it should.